Hi, my name's Grace. I'm part of the Early Career Reference Group, and I'm sitting here with Nate.
Hi, I'm Nathan Cornish-Rayleigh, and I'm the Professional Support Advisor for Speech Pathology Australia.
So Nate, I think today we were going to chat about clinical supervision, and I was just going to ask you some questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So why do I need supervision?
So supervision is really core to our practice as speech pathologists. It permits us as individuals and also the profession to ensure that we're providing evidence-based practice. Supervision really provides four main functions. One is to offer support and provide opportunities for critical reflection on our practice. It ensures that professional development needs are being addressed. It helps to ensure that the work we are performing is competent and that it meets work requirements for the role we're performing. And it ensures that we're engaged with our employer and with our field of practice.
And in terms of that, how much supervision should I be receiving?
So the supervision that we receive really depends on the time that we've been in the field and our individual needs. So Speech Pathology Australia recommends that those who've been practicing for 2 years or less receive 60 minutes of supervision per week. And those who've been practicing for 2 years or more, perhaps 60 minutes fortnightly or monthly is more appropriate. However, that is a dynamic figure, and if we are finding ourselves in a new clinical situation or facing complex needs and we need more support, then really we should be receiving more supervision.
Yeah, that makes sense. And is my employer responsible for providing the supervision?
The short answer is yes. It's a responsibility of employers to provide the resources that their employees need to practice competently. But really, it also benefits the employers. When we are practicing competently and we understand our administrative tasks, things really run more smoothly for the practice.
Yeah. What can I do if my employer doesn't provide me with supervision?
So one of the best ways to address this really is to plan ahead. So we can start addressing supervision even before we have a job. During the interview process, it's good to ask questions like, what type of supervision will I receive? How frequently? If I have individual needs that come up, how can we address those together through supervision? And then if it's possible to get that put into our employment contract, that certainly helps us. And again, that ends up helping our employer as well to make sure that we're practicing competently. Speech Pathology Australia has a document called The Role and Value of Professional Support, which I think can be really helpful when we're having those discussions with potential employers so they understand the benefit of us receiving appropriate supervision. All that said, we understand that there are times when an employer might need to find supervision externally, and that can happen for a lot of reasons. Perhaps there aren't the time resources available to the employer, or nobody in our practice has the clinical skill set to really help us with the job that we're performing. Some things that can help out with that, Speech Pathology Australia has a supervision register where people who have self-identified as meeting the requirements to be a supervisor have self-identified. That said, we always need to check the qualifications of anybody that's going to be providing external supervision. And it's also important to remember that supervision is typically, or supervisors are typically compensated for the work that they do in supporting us. And it's appropriate for us to ask our employers to pay for supervision if it's being provided externally. However, there are some circumstances where we as clinicians need to pay for supervision ourselves in order to be able to provide clinically appropriate services.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess on the back of that, what are the requirements to be a supervisor, and how do you determine if someone is qualified or a good fit to be in that supervisor relationship with?
Great question. Speech Pathology Australia recommends that supervisors have 3 years experience or more in the field of practice. So for example, I've worked in school systems and in private practice. and I certainly have more than 3 years of experience, but I probably wouldn't be appropriate to be supervising somebody that's working in an acute care hospital. A supervisor should understand practice issues and policy that surround our practice area. Supervision is also a learned skill, and it's something that we need training and support in to be appropriate supervisors. So supervisors should have undertaken a course in supervision. And then something we encourage is for supervisors to also engage in their own supervision and to get the support they need to be providing their services as a supervisor.
Yeah, okay. And then within a supervision session, what can I expect?
So one thing we can expect is one-to-one support. So that's where we're sitting down individually with our supervisor. We can talk about things confidentially. We can go over complex cases and talk very frankly about the clients that we're serving. We can also expect to get some feedback about what we're doing and some support in charting a course for us to develop the skills that we need in order to continue providing competent services. A supervisor might suggest professional development that we can engage in. We can also sometimes expect group supervision, where we are receiving feedback and supervision and advice with some of our colleagues and peers. Now with group supervision, obviously, like I mentioned, we need time to be able to speak very frankly and have confidentiality. So it's important that we're receiving as much or more one-to-one supervision as group supervision. Another thing that we should expect is that we're keeping records of the supervision sessions. And this is just part of good professional practice, but because supervision counts towards our professional self-regulation, we should be keeping records to be able to count those activities towards our PSR.
Yeah, great. And then probably a common question, what's the difference between a supervisor and a mentor?
It is a common question, and that's because there's kind of a Venn diagram and there's a lot of overlap between those roles, but there are some key important differences. So a mentoring partnership is more of a voluntary, temporary partnership, whereas a supervision relationship is a requirement of the workplace. Mentoring focuses more on long-term growth and development, whereas supervision, the key focus is on our competence to perform the job that we are functioning in. A mentoring partnership tends to be more collaborative and more collegial, whereas supervision, there's a power difference between the two parties, and we're receiving feedback and we're accountable to the supervisor. And then a mentoring partnership is really acts as a guide towards self-directed growth, where again the supervisor is providing feedback, and there's more, an external push towards our professional growth.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for answering all those questions and your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.